This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I talk with digital strategist Cory Huff, and we talk about how he's able to help talented artists sell their art online. We also talk about the importance of narrative when selling any creative work, and how to use Facebook ads to sell your art. Enjoy the episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have Cory Huff. Cory is a Portland-based digital strategist and owner of Abundant Artist, a business which helps talented artists sell their art online and also looks to dispel the starving artist myth. Cory does this by providing business coaching for artists as well as creating awesome online courses, including Facebook marketing for artists and selling art on Instagram. In addition to his work as a digital strategist, he is also an actor, storyteller, director, and photographer, so is very in touch with the challenges facing today's creatives. So, Cory, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, James.
So, share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of stuff going on. I just got back from getting held up by a bridge on my morning run. And besides that, the summer Shakespeare season's getting ready to get started. I know it's just the beginning of May, but these things get cast already. So as an actor, I do a lot of classical theater, a lot of Shakespeare. And we're doing a program called Original Practice Shakespeare this summer. And for those who don't know, when Shakespeare was writing and directing and performing his plays, they didn't really rehearse. So if you can imagine doing Shakespeare with no rehearsal, essentially what happened was all the actors were given their scripts, but their scripts only had their lines and the line before their line. So basically, they would just stand on stage with these scrolls in their hands, waiting for the line at the top of their page to be spoken by somebody else on stage, and then they would jump in with their line as a response. And the reason Shakespeare did that was he was trying to prevent other theater companies from copying his scripts.
So it was like an early form of protection.
Yes, it was the early form of copyright protection, and you had a prompter on stage who was the only person with the full script. And when people got lost, the prompter would prompt them, or if there were an interruption, they would stop the show and bring it back around or whatever. So we do that in the parks around town here. I'll be doing the play Hamlet, and I'm playing like 6 different characters in Hamlet, and then I'm also doing A Midsummer Night's Dream later this summer.
And it's a big anniversary this year for Shakespeare as well.
Yeah, the 400th anniversary of his death.
Very cool, very cool. And so how did you, obviously a lot of people know you from The Abundant Artist as well. How did you kind of learn your craft in terms of how artists can market and sell their art online? Where did that come from?
That's a great question. I think it started, my college jobs were all in sales, right? I sold cell phones, and I sold utility services, and I sold anything that anybody would hire me to sell just so I could make money to pay for school. So I started there, and I just sort of naturally have a gift for talking to people, and I enjoy selling, which all the creative people just rolled their eyes. But
yeah, because I can imagine about 80% of our listeners just now are going, "You actually enjoy selling? You enjoy?" Because that's a real hang-up for a lot of creatives.
Yeah, well, I think I just enjoy talking about myself. And I really enjoy hearing what other people have to say about themselves. I'm a curious person. So I never think of sales as trying to convince or trick people into buying stuff. It's more like I want to find out whether or not the thing that I have will be interesting or helpful to you. And so by asking other people a lot of questions about themselves, I can find out how whatever I'm selling fits into whatever they need in their life. So that's how I think about sales and marketing. So after doing sales for a few years and getting involved in student-run productions while I was in college, I produced the student shows the last 2 years of college, and basically my job was to get people to the show, and so that was where my interest in marketing started. And then when I graduated from college and I was looking for a survival job, I got a job working in internet marketing for a little boutique company, and just sort of went from there. And because all my friends are artists and performers, basically people started asking me to teach classes on marketing, and we went back and forth in a few different areas, but the people who were really interested in paying for classes and things like that were the visual artists, the painters and the sculptors and stuff like that. And so the Abundant Artist just sort of narrowed its focus. We decided to focus on those artists who have a physical something to sell, because there's a little more empowerment there as a creative. You can make a thing and then turn around and find people to buy it, rather than as a performer, especially as an actor, you have to wait for people to cast you. You have to wait for other people's decisions to decide whether or not you make money. Now, obviously, you can self-produce too, but that's sort of where the acting career is. And so our business, The Abundant Artist, the people who responded were the visual artists. So that's the direction we went in.
And so with when you're dealing with visual artists, and I know a lot of people, when they first hear about digital marketing, online marketing, or especially internet marketing, they think of those horrible long sales pages with like yellow writing,
the yellow highlighters
and stuff like that. But obviously things have kind of developed over the years as well, and we're in a kind of different place now. So when you first start talking to artists about how they should be thinking about online to promote and sell their art, what are some of the initial things you start talking to them about?
That's interesting. I started this business 7 years ago, so things have changed online quite a bit, but they haven't really changed as far as the principles go, right? Like, the idea is get in front of more people and convince those people that what you have is valuable, and figure out how to fit what you have to their interests. So when we started, what was I telling people? It's funny because I have this class, that our flagship course, How to Sell Your Art Online, is the same class that we've been running since the very beginning. Now, we've changed it and modified it and adapted it, but essentially the core of the class is learning how to talk about whatever it is that you create, whether it's paintings or sculpture or what have you. Learning how to talk about that effectively, learning how to communicate the ideas behind your art. I think where a lot of creative people are challenged is somebody looks at a piece of art, somebody who is not steeped in modern art, for example, looks at a Rothko or looks at a Pollock and says, I have no idea what that means. And for a small percentage of people, they'll think, that is amazing, I want more of that in my life. But for most people, they just look at it and they feel a sort of alienation. Because they feel intimidated by it, because they know that so many people think that is cool or that is interesting. But if you can give them a little bit of an in, just give them a few sentences of art history or help them understand the context that Rothko or Pollock were coming from, then suddenly that piece is a lot more interesting. And the same applies for every individual artist. If somebody looks at your work and goes, I don't get it, if you can give them, a little work in progress video, or give them just a little bit of a spiel about how you created the work that you created, and give people an opportunity to explore and discover and make an emotional connection with your work, then from there, everything else falls into place. And then it's just magnifying your voice, learning how to get more people on your mailing list, more people to your website. But you have to have those fundamentals in place of knowing how to talk about your work effectively, as well as who are the people that are most likely to respond to your work.
So that sounds a little bit almost like I used to live in Napa, California, and I was always wondering why one bottle of wine was so much more expensive than another bottle of wine. And sometimes when I spoke to the winemakers, they would say, well, obviously this is how it's made and blah, 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 and they would kind of go into the details of it. But a lot of it also kind of came down to the storytelling and the narrative that they gave and the backstory. And then this wine would sell for more than this wine because it had a really interesting provenance. And maybe the creator, the person that created it, was doing it with a certain thing in mind. So that sounds like what you're kind of talking about is kind of similar, kind of letting people into the world of the artist and what their creative process is and what their inspirations are for that art.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm amazed that there are not more artists doing like time-lapse videos of them creating their work, or even just like taking pictures of works in progress, unfinished works, and showing people what it looks like before it's done, and talking about what the thought process is, because every time I run the class and we get the artists who sort of get their voice right, we get these viral videos that go out, and people love seeing artists' work in progress.
And then when you're working with artists and you're having to kind of be creative yourself, and creative from the marketing standpoint, from developing ideas and new ways to promote and market their work, can you talk about some of the, when you're kind of sitting there and you're going, okay, I'm working with these artists and I want to come up with some ideas about how to best kind of, what's kind of going on in your mind? So I'm talking about you as the creative, rather than necessarily working with just the creatives as well.
So how do I come up with new marketing angles for my own work?
Yeah, where do you find some of your inspiration? Where do you kind of look to, and to try and get a sense of, okay, well, this is an idea we can test, we can try. Let's see how this works.
Right. So, it's a little bit unfair because I do a lot of marketing, and so I've tried a lot of stuff, and I sort of have things narrowed down to who likes the kind of work that I make. There's not a lot of people who are super into improv Shakespeare. So it's sort of a narrow audience, and just figuring out, like, the hardest part is figuring out who they are and where to find them. And then from there, it's just making sure you communicate with them, right? So what's fun is Facebook ads are super effective. I can run Facebook ads at people in the Portland zip codes who like Shakespeare, or who like some of the other specific Shakespeare theater companies in town, and spend $5 and target all of them, right? That kind of stuff. And that's pretty effective. I also maintain a personal mailing list for people who are interested in seeing me in a play. So I do a lot of theater. I'm probably in anywhere between 2 and 6 shows a year here in Portland. And a few years ago, I wrote and produced a one-man show that I was in, and so we started building a mailing list then. And basically every time I'm in a show, I'll send an email out to everybody, a few weeks in advance, and then, the day the show opens, letting them know that my show's coming up.
And then when you're talking to visual artists around, so let's say Facebook marketing, and saying, I think this is an idea, you should invest a little bit here into Facebook marketing for this particular campaign that you're looking to run, whether they're an installation artist, a painter, or pottery, whatever the thing may be. When you're kind of setting up that very first campaign for them, what kind of campaign are you normally setting? Is it to set up just to likes to their fan page, or is it a video? You're trying to promote a video, or to give something away for free in order to get someone's email address?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we generally don't try to give stuff away. Like, we don't do discounts. Like, I see a lot of artists saying, join my mailing list and you can get a discount on my art, which is really unfortunate, because for fine art, for artists whose work would potentially show in an art gallery, discounts actually, they get in your way, because fine art should be a luxury product. So we generally try to shy away from discounts or giving away free stuff. Well, with a lot of artists, you can sort of pull a power play. You can say, join my mailing list to get a preview of my work, or join my mailing list to be an insider and have the privilege of supporting an artist who's making amazing work. If you have confidence in your work, you can pull a power play like that. So
it's kind of almost like using the exclusivity of the artist.
Exactly. Exclusivity. Okay. And for Facebook ads, some campaign structures that I'm a big fan of right now are sending people to blog posts, like using Facebook to send people to blog posts. And then retargeting the people who visit blog posts to get those people on your mailing list, and then retargeting the people who are on your mailing list to make purchases.
Okay. So, and you're finding that by doing that gives you, it's a lower cost to send people onto your site, because you're sending them to content as opposed to sending them to something where they're going to opt in for something. And then, exactly. And also then you're building more trust and goodwill around the brand of that particular artist.
Exactly. So instead of an ad that says buy my print for $50 or $100 or whatever, instead we're saying, hey, take a look at this artist's time-lapse video, right? Like check out how this artist makes their work and look at the final product. And we're not asking, and that video is maybe on a blog post, and we're not asking them to make a purchase. But then with Facebook's retargeting pixels, we know, we can then run an ad that says everybody who is a Facebook user who clicked on that ad and looked at that page, show them an ad that points them to the artist's Insiders Club, right?
Yeah.
And the Insiders Club is just a mailing list, right? It's basically a fan club. And then once they're on the mailing list, then you can email them when you have shows coming up, or you can email them about prints that you have for sale. And then you can also run retargeting ads on Facebook showing people your work.
And then I suppose you can even take that, as you build that email list from there, you can then import that back into Facebook again and say, find me another, a couple of thousand people that are similar to these kind of people as well. So you can start to expand your following.
Right, yeah, lookalike audiences are super powerful. And then you take those lookalike audiences and just start the cycle over. You send them to the blog post and then get them to opt into the mailing list. And
then going back to your own creative work, can you tell us about a time when you worked on a project, you gave it your heart and your soul, and for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Oh, man. So a couple of years ago, so I took about a year break from acting because my wife and we went to Europe and lived in Europe for a year. I guess it wasn't a full year break because I did get to do a reading of Twelfth Night at the Shakespeare and Company bookshop in Paris. But before we went to Europe, things were going pretty well, and my wife and I decided that we were going to produce some plays by some pretty obscure playwrights that we like a lot. And we decided that we would start by doing some in-house readings, basically just perform the shows in somebody's living room for just a very small audience, 30, 40 people, just to build momentum going into the full productions that we were doing. And these full productions were they were basically in my artist friend's studio. So there was space for probably about 70 or 80 people to come see the show. But there was a freak snowstorm in Portland. So we did the first two in-house readings, and then the following weekend we had scheduled 3 more, and there was a freak snowstorm. And in Portland, it doesn't snow, so if it does snow, the city doesn't have the capability to plow the roads and stuff. So basically, we had to cancel all 3 of those performances. And then when we got to doing the bigger performances in the following weeks, it really hurt our attendance because we didn't have that buzz that we had planned on building. So I think I'm not sure how to plan around that. But that's a great example of a fail, but I'm not sure how we would have planned around it because when we planned everything months in advance, and the snowstorm, we only had like a week's warning. So
I think that's what they call in French force majeure.
yes, force majeure for sure. But there's lots of things like that. Ideas that you think are going to work out great don't for whatever reason. Some big theater company copies your idea, or just things just don't work out sometimes.
And what would you say is your biggest strength and biggest weakness as a creative yourself?
My biggest strength as a creative is I am willing to work really, really hard. I will put in all the hours and do all the crappy hard work for whatever project that I'm working on. My biggest weakness is probably, and I used to say that maybe it was something else, but I think what I'm discovering recently is my biggest opportunity in front of me is building a team. I think that a lot of the ideas that I have and things that I want to do, I'm realizing that I have to build a team and assemble a cohort of people who are interested in similar things so that I can make them happen.
And in this creative journey you've had yourself, can you tell us about any insights or light bulbs or these kind of aha moments where you've kind of gone to yourself, okay, this is a direction I need to go in the work I'm doing, or a new distinction that you've made?
trying to think. I think maybe I don't understand the question super well. Maybe you could reframe the question.
So, you've done all these really cool different things, from acting and from the traveling work you've done as well, and then working with artists to help them in promoting and selling their art as well. But in this journey that you've had, have there been any times or where you've had that kind of light bulb moment? You've gone, oh, okay, I need to be doing this type of work here, or I need to maybe taking a direction in this way with the kind of projects I'm working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the shows that we produced a couple years ago that I just told you about that were canceled is a good example of that. So when I was in college, I really loved the work of Brian Friel. He's an Irish playwright, pretty well known over there, and I just love his work so much. The plays like Translations, which are all about like the dying of the Gaelic language and the tension between British people and Irish people and all of that kind of stuff. And the reason that I loved it so much is Brian is Irish and he cares deeply about Irish issues, and he was writing about these things that he knows about very deeply and cares about very deeply. And I'm a Mormon and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And if you don't know the church's history, back in the mid 1800s, when the church was just getting started, the church, the early members of the church were persecuted quite a bit. Lots of people were killed, and they were driven from their homes in 5 or 6 different places across the United States. And that's how they ended up in Salt Lake City, in the Salt Lake Valley. And that's where Salt Lake City was founded. And so there's these amazing stories from the early days of the church. People making incredible sacrifices, walking hundreds of miles across the country, hauling their stuff in a handcart because they had a belief in something. And there's a growing group of Mormon playwrights who are doing some really incredible work, and those are the stories that I'm interested in telling right now. And for whatever reason, I've been lucky and had the opportunity to produce some of those plays, and I'm in touch with some of those playwrights, and I just think there's some really great stories there to tell.
And that's just something, because you kind of feel it in your heart and in your gut. This is the kind of work that you should be doing. It kind of brings together a lot of these different things that you've been doing, and it kind of coalesces around these works that you want to kind of get out there and build to get out to more people and have more people experience them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several really good stories, stuff that's really topical. There's a show called Facing East that I've produced, and I've seen a handful of productions around the country. And it's a story about an older, middle-aged Mormon couple dealing with the suicide of their gay son. I like really dark, heavy drama. So,
you've been working with Shakespeare, so there's some pretty dark issues there.
yes, and for whatever reason, my soul just gravitates towards things that are really sad. So I love telling sad stories, and Facing East is one of them. Mahan Ray Stewart is a playwright that I love a lot, an LDS playwright, and he's got some great stories about some of the early members of the church that I love. I'm looking forward to producing some of his work in the near future.
So, as you kind of developed in this kind of creative journey, what's some of the best advice that you've ever received in terms of doing the kind of work that you do and having the kind of the motivation to keep pushing when times are tough?
Best advice. So when I was in college, my favorite acting teacher, she was really hard on all of us. She was so she was so mean sometimes, but I loved her because she pushed me, and she pushed me hard, and she made me do better than I thought I could. And I asked her once, when do you become a good artist? Like, when do you start to realize the vision of what you're capable of doing? And she said, after you're 30 is when you start. and I was 24 at the time or something like that. And I thought, oh man, like,
I've got to wait.
Like, that's 6 years is a long time, but it's not actually. I think that as an artist, you have to live. You have to have some experiences to draw on. You have to know what it's like to be a human, and have an array of experiences. When you're 22 years old, most 22-year-olds don't have any idea, what it's like to have a kid or have a family, or even just be paying their own bills, right? Like if you're 22 and in college, there's a good chance you're living in a dorm and your parents are still helping you, and there's just so much out there that you haven't experienced yet when you're young. And I'm only 35. I feel like I'm just starting to settle into my skin and be comfortable in who I am as an artist and as a person, and being comfortable in how do I say this? Being comfortable as an artist in the stories that you have to tell, and not trying to do what other people think you should do, or not trying to do what you think you should do, or what you think other people want you to do. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, if I can find it, I'll put it on the show notes as well. There was a very interesting study done on the ages upon which different types of artists hit their creative peaks. Mm-hmm. And actually it depends on the art form. A lot as well, but it was actually not just artists; it was also other professions. For example, if you're a physicist, chances are you need to be hitting that point around the age of 30, because that's the peak time. But for other, and I worked many years ago with the great opera star Bryn Terfel, and he was talking. I was talking to him at the time, and he must have been about 35, 36 at that point, and he was telling me he'd been basically practicing all his life for a part which he said he knew that his voice wouldn't be in the right place until he was at least 40. And he'd been continually honing his voice to get to that part that he wanted to sing when he was 40. He said he couldn't sing it when he was 25, can't sing it when he's 30, but he knew by the time he got to 40 that was the point. So sometimes it's like we mentioned wine earlier, but it was, sometimes good wine kind of ages, and things develop over time, and things are going to be right at that particular time. And you hear it all the time with jazz singers. Some of the best jazz singers, mm-hmm. You want to hear in their voice that they've lived. It's people like younger jazz singers. It's difficult to hear. You get these incredible artists like Amy Winehouse, who seem to be channeling something, a much older soul, I think. In her, though. Yeah,
there are outliers, for sure.
There's definitely outliers, but yeah, many of those voices you hear, they definitely come when people have hit a point in their lives where, as you said, they've had those life experiences.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, Amy Winehouse is such an interesting example, because I think that there are people that burn too bright. Mm. There are people who they destroy themselves. Their creativity is talking about the nature of creativity is so interesting, because there's a lot of lumping creativity and mental illness and drug use together.
Yeah.
And drug use in some ways can actually make people more creative, but it also unlocks all sorts of other problems.
Yeah, in fact, I was speaking just last week at a conference exactly about this issue, where and some of the recent studies about mental illness and creativity, and also drug use. And Martha Farrar, who, if you look at her research, a professor of neuroscience at University of Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. She did
I know who you're talking
a fascinating study actually showing your levels of having insights and these creative insights and aha moments are actually reduced if you have high levels of caffeine. She said, if you want to have more insights, don't drink much caffeine. For that state, there's other points of the creative process it can be useful. But so let's talk about any online resources or tools like Evernote, or things that you use that you really love and you would suggest our listeners check out.
Yeah. So what online? I love Evernote. That's a great example. I also love Skitch.
Yeah, that's a great tool.
You've used Skitch, and I actually. What's the word I'm looking for? I found the old version of Skitch from before Evernote bought it, and I still use that because I like it better. No offense to Evernote. I love them. I'm a Evernote Pro member, but I like the old version of Skitch. Other things that I use, like there's a tool called Over that allows you to add text to images.
Oh, okay.
And that's super, super useful, not just in making silly memes, but just like explaining things to people. Super useful. What other online I have so many online like web tools, things that there's the standard stuff like Photoshop and, the stuff that all creatives use.
And what about records and books? What if you could recommend just one record and one book to our listeners? What would they be?
Yeah, one book. Oh, are we talking about books on like technical how-to stuff, or are we talking about books on sort of the nature of creativity? What kind of books would you like to hear recommended?
I think probably more the latter, or if there's books that you've gifted more often than others.
Books that I've gifted more often. I really love Drive by Daniel Pink.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I think that a lot of people are waiting around for what Dan Pink calls extrinsic motivation, waiting for other people to tell them what to do or how to go, when it seems like, and that works for some people, but the people who are doing the most deep work are involved with intrinsic motivation, in motivation that comes from within, right? Beyond that, The War of Art is a great book. Steven Pressfield, talking about the resistance that comes when you're doing good work, and how doing good work requires fighting whatever that weird psychological
force
barrier, barrier comes along and you usually know that you're about to do good work when that resistance becomes really strong because you're trying to be safe.
And what about on the record? Is there a record that you would recommend?
And I think this might be like a British American thing.
An album. Yes.
An album. Music. Music. So I go through phases. My all-time favorite band is Rush. They're a rock and roll band from Canada.
Yep.
And I own all 30 or so studio albums that they have put out. I went to their 40th anniversary tour when they came to Portland last year. Been my favorite band for a long time.
And if someone hadn't got into Rush before, what is the one album that you suggest they would start with?
Oh, jeez. See, that's a problem when there's 30 albums. If I were going to pick one album, their biggest selling album is Moving Pictures. That's the one with their big famous song, Tom Sawyer. But my personal favorite album is probably Counterparts, which came out in the early 90s. It's a nice mix of some of the less annoying parts of 80s synth pop and the more aggressive 90s heavy metal. It's a very strange mix. Rush is a band they're progressive rock, which means that they're all like musicians, right? Like they're playing in weird time signatures and they're doing very layered textural music. It's the kind of music that people who are really into complex music like listening to.
Great. And we'll put all these on the show notes. So people just go to jamestaylor.me, type in Cory Huff in the search bar, and you'll be able to get all the show notes here as well. And imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning, Cory, and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade, the Evernote and the Photoshop and all the tools that you use every day and the knowledge that you've acquired, but you have no contacts. No one knows who you are either. How would you restart?
I would start talking to as many people as I could and figuring out how I could be valuable to them. I would start asking people what they need, and then I would find a way to get them what they need. And
final question for you. What is the best way that people can connect with you, learn more about the projects you're working on, and all the cool online courses that you have as well? Sure. Everything's over at theabundantartist.com. My book is coming out June 28th, which is How to Sell Your Art Online is the name of the book, and it's being published by HarperCollins.
and that'll be available. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon. And then we also have a conference coming up, and you can find out about that on the website. The conference is the Abundant Artist Conference, and it's a business conference for visual artists, and that'll be in Portland, Oregon on July 1st and 2nd.
Awesome. Well, Cory, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I wish you all the best with the new book and all the other projects that you've got going. Catch you soon.
Thanks a lot, James.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.